This year for Star Citizen was supposed to be different. It has been 8 months since Chris Roberts told us that this would be the year of playability. Now, a lot has changed in Star Citizen since that letter from the chairman, but what hasn't is the frustration of the community. Many people use this post as fuel for that frustration because the expectations were meant to be higher for the day-to-day playability. So I decided to do something a little crazy. I looked back at every single weekend review that I did, which had links to the patch notes and hotfix notes, and see what they actually did and talk about the good and bad of this year and see if they're actually living up to the expectations that they set. The issue here is that we'll all come from a different frame of reference of what is playability. So let me tell you mine. Improvements on the most interacted experiences that we have. Things like logging in, general server stability, AI interactions, missions, inventory. This includes very popular freight elevators that we're dealing with now, ASOP terminals, flying your ship, and general just buying and selling. What cannot be ignored, though, is Chris's perspective here, as we're sort of grading CIG on how well they delivered on that perspective. He said playability equals performance, stability, and content. But he then goes more into what my expectations are, like bug fixing and fewer overall obstacles while playing. So my goal here is to touch on each of these categories, bounce back and forth between the fixes and the things they maybe haven't resolved yet, and give you a bit more of a reference as to what they have actually done this year to meet Chris's goals. But before we jump into the details, let me share with you today's sponsor. Thank you to Exter for sponsoring this video. I'm here to share something I've had the pleasure of using since April, the Exter Wallet Pro. This is an upgraded version of their original wallet. It has more capacity and can hold up to 14 cards while remaining sleek in your pocket, and it has built-in RFID protection. You know about next-gen consoles for gaming? This is a next-gen wallet that has a super cool metal card ejector trigger for quick and smooth retrieval. It is made with premium materials, no plastic. This thing is built to last, and because of that, it comes with a lifetime warranty. This is your wallet for life. And the next thing really came in handy just a couple weeks ago. I took a trip to visit family and I was struggling to pack my bag, so I used the Travel Pack vacuum kit. This thing can give you up to 60% more space while being travel sized for your backpack or suitcase. It is super portable, comes with a USB-C rechargeable pump. This thing's awesome. I even used it as a laundry bag for the dirty clothes and kept them separate for the trip back. Head over to partner.exter.com/SaltEMike, where they already have up to 32% off, but if you use code SaltEMike, you get 10% more off. Once again, get up to 42% off these awesome Exter products and more with code SaltEMike at partner.exter.com/SaltEMike. All right, with all the bills paid, let's start out with performance. And I think it's safe to assume that this means both client and server performance. And I'll be honest with you, I don't feel a super significant client performance improvement in the last 8 months. There are quite a few references to client performance in pyro stations and patch notes, but the issue here for me is that I really, it's only a feel thing, as I don't ever actually look at my FPS in the game. Also, I don't exactly have your average PC on the Steam census or whatever. I have a 5800 X3D and a 3090, so my experience might be skewed in the, better performance direction. I think the obvious win here was the work done on upscaling and how it's pretty stable and helpful. I haven't experienced too many situations where I felt my frame rate was so low that I could barely play, but I still haven't made the swap to Vulkan, as it seems it causes too many issues still. I can say, though, that I think the experience is not as smooth as it should be. Certainly not for something that's a Twitch shooter and with ship combat and FPS combat and things like that. It just isn't where it needs to be just yet. Server performance is something that has really bothered me more recently this year, but over the whole course of the year. This was the promise with server meshing. This was the whole point of making the letter from the chairman, is they did server meshing. Server FPS was meant to improve. This is something that CIG is serially bad with. The moment they get a little room on the server in terms of performance, they slap something massive into the game just to make it worse. The best example here was right before Hathor. Server frame rates tended to be quite high, often around 30. But then the moment they shoved a giant space laser from some old Arena Commander map, the Idris, and a giant space worm, I started to notice things dipped, often in the teens and even the single digits at times. And the moment we get this, everything else in the game tends to fall apart. That's where our performance starts to die. Let's include loading times into this as well. Early in the year, they were insanely bad. Not to mention the fact that many people couldn't even log in. Remember the 60K errors? Holy. For load times, double-digit minutes to get into the game was commonplace early this year. Who is going to wait to play an experience that is below early access quality that takes that long to load into? I don't think too many people. So they addressed this, but I feel like I'm maybe a bit out of touch with other games. The current Star Citizen loading times are still quite long, right? Leave a comment down below and let me know. Even after a death, it's like 30 plus seconds before you wake up. Now let's move on to stability. And for that, let's start with the good. General server stability has improved a lot this year. It did not start well. We learned about what a server error loop was, but today I rarely see a full server crash where we're booted to the menu. And the server errors typically don't last very long if they happen at all. I don't know what the average play session is now for us without a crash, but there's no denying that it must be longer than before 4.0 was released by a big margin, and yes, this includes the current instability that we're totally aware of in 4.2.1. Back to the login flow, they added queues that caused the servers to have a lot less load on them when a number of people are logging in at the same time, as well as improvements to party launching, which are quite nice as well. Let's move on to next to what I would consider a negative. Remember 2023 CitizenCon, where we thought we wouldn't be frustrated with quantum travel and the star map experience anymore? There are still a ton of bugs and lack of attention being paid on this. The actual quantum travel experience is very similar to what we had before 4.0, not better. The star map experience is arguably much better. They have added that right side menu where you can select the mission that you want, party members, and even your ships that you might want to travel to. But overall, I think this experience is below the expectations following the letter and even the expectations that they set a couple of years ago. Transit, I would consider this more of a positive experience. Reason being, they did something we haven't seen them do enough of. They did some refactoring, kind of, not entirely, but they pulled forward a feature of the Transit refactor early, which is this self-healing thing. Since then, it has not been perfect, but it is far from the biggest pain point in the game, and it has been for a really long time, right? Even pre 4.0. Now something that we saw this year that we need back ASAP is also something that they worked on in terms of transit: hangar respawning. Do not sleep on this, CIG, please. Skipping transit altogether is probably the best choice overall for the playability that you were going for this year. Now something bad. This is probably the worst in terms of stability, and that is persistence. Not a single patch has gone by where at least someone has not lost something that they purchased in the game. On top of this, we have a patch every month, and the game still can't remember and save where I left something. If I left my mining stuff at a refinery, it should stay there. I feel like this needs a similar refactor to the transit system, and I think CIG just blamed it on a third party a few years ago and moved on or something. How is this not in the top 3 of priorities to get done right now? That's crazy to me. This doesn't need game design. It doesn't need art. This needs to just literally have a memory. You cannot say anything about the year of playability and not solve this issue in 2025. I'm sorry. This should have been at the top of the list in February when talking to Benoit and other things, right? The next thing is a bit of a mixed bag. Inventory. They did something in the most recent patch that really made the inventories much more snappy. But yeah, nearly 8 months in, and it was still frustrating, right? And if a server isn't performing well, it's still pretty rough. They did show a really detailed bit of UI art with their plans of what the inventory system will look like and what it will do, but not much else in terms of functionality. Many of us are still dropping our drinks on the ground just to be able to pick them up and drink still. Is this trend starting to show? The last two things are something that no matter your playstyle, you have to interact with. ASOP terminals and hangers are another mixed bag, and another thing that every single player is going to interact with at some point. They did a great job with a tiny little playability improvement. If you interact with a ship on your ASOP and you come back to the main menu there, you'll still be scrolled to the ship you interacted with. Awesome. But no search, no hide, nothing based on the size or type of ship, just a long list. This really only affects dummies like me, but there are a lot of dummies like me out there. Now, moving on to content. Missions are something that was a huge part of this year in terms of playability. The ones that we do have work far more consistently and do work across shards. They improved on sharing in some of them, where the rewards and reputation or the points that are shared with your party, not as much in the current event, obviously, but most of their focus seems to be on these events rather than a general mission set. Is that bad? For stability, I would argue yes. Why? Let's start right from the beginning. This year, there were literally blockers in the tutorial mission. That's wild, right? On a positive note, they had the right idea with the ghillie missions, but they just decided that they weren't a ship combat tutorial for some reason, and honestly didn't spend enough time with the finer details of these missions. But the real killer of the stability still seems to be these sandbox activities. Contested zones have not had consistently working experiences since day one. If it wasn't performance, it was bugs, specifically with doors and card printers. We're still dealing with this today. And if that didn't bother you, how about the fact that there are about 1,000 exploits to skip the loop altogether, but these are the least problematic? The turning point this year was incredibly obvious. Hathor and Align and Mine activities. We already spoke about this in terms of performance, but if you wanted to participate in this, good luck getting your cards to work. The event was shipped through multiple patches where the loop would just be broken entirely, and with all the interactions that we needed to do. With Lazarus and the worm in game, as well as the Idris at the same time, this compounded those issues even more. AI stopped leaving spawn lockers, teleporting, freezing, and many times the worm just didn't spawn. And don't forget, any missions that involve a freight elevator, all of these did. But this was the year of playability. What did I find myself doing? I played these sandbox loops more than anything I've ever done in Star Citizen ever. It is really the first time they tied anything in the game together. And the little bow on this present of activities was Wicklow. This brought me more activity and player interaction than I had ever seen. So I struggle with this one. Did we need these activities if everything we talked about before was broken? Maybe not, but do we need stuff like this for 1.0? Absolutely, and I imagine this will inform their priorities going forward. Speaking of that, narrative content. I think they were way too early on this. The current event is incredibly popular, but it doesn't appear to be because players are diving into it narratively. They put a bunch of rewards out there that players seem to be really interested in and are actively wanting to earn. What little voice acting they did just doesn't really hit, and I think it's the kind of stuff that is probably a bit of waste of time at this stage, although they are going to be able to reuse this stuff for many missions going forward. And then flight. What was the point of this show that they did with Rich and John Crew? This is where they teased changing the flight model yet again, and we still have not seen the results of this. Why? All we have is a collection of posts and discussions from Yogi, Rich, and John about something that is super important that we actually feel, not read about or talk about. What is the flight team so focused on that we aren't seeing more consistent improvements? Stability isn't just about crashes and bugs. It is about a consistent, stable experience that players can actively learn and get used to. How are we supposed to do that if every 6 months there's a new flight model? You have to assume the team is focused on squadron and engineering, which I guess is one of those features that we might see added this year. But yeah, that's content. But again, stability, playability, a consistent experience. We're not getting that if we're constantly changing things. Now, I would love to remind everyone of the thread that Zylo posted a while back where he asked people to share their most frustrating issues. Many of the things that we talked about were on this list. Many have also gotten very little in the way of attention so far this year, and I have no idea why. This was my expectation after reading the letter. The day-to-day things walking, flying, interactions, inventory, missions, and more should have a smoother and hopefully acceptably smooth from the outside world experience right now. And they simply do not live up to even an early access standard, in my opinion, at the moment. Jared also gave us this clip on Star Citizen Live with Benoit early this year.
If patches are going to keep coming no matter what, then what's actually changing this year? So like everything else in Star Citizen, I'm certain this too will continue to expand and mature as we move throughout the year. But in its simplest terms, what this means is pulling engineers and programmers off of a lot of the new fancy feature work they've always been on and putting them on less sexy but more quality of life driven efforts like rebuilding elevators and transit to better work with the realities of server meshing, fixing issues where your hangar eats your ship and your cargo disappears, finally introducing some version of unique item recovery as quickly and as efficiently as we can, and much, much more. It means a greater focus on refining the gameplay that's already there in the persistent universe, and less time spent on continuously introducing the instability of a multitude of brand new features every 3 months or so. It also means a new content and gameplay delivery schedule intricately tied to the introduction of new ongoing story narratives for the persistent universe that allow you as players to reshape the galaxy around you, beginning with 401. And the faction warfare that will change Pyro by the end of this year. So what? No more new features? No. It just means that we're going to continue to work on new gameplay like resource network, crafting, and base building in the background, and do it slower, more deliberately, and with more time to cook. It means these new features not coming out as quickly as originally planned, because the same super talented engineers and programmers that used to be working on those will now be focused on fixing what's essentially already there first.
Now, how can we say they're doing a fantastic or great job when this was the expectation that was set? And this was clearly being read off of a teleprompter. They have had time to prepare this talk. This year, I thought that it would be better. I thought they would do a better job. I believed in their initiative. Hard to say on the experience and bug side that they're getting a passing grade. And given the trade-off where Star Citizen features are being made slower, was it worth it? I don't think so right now. But in terms of making the game more enjoyable to play and actually giving me a number of tasks I want to do, I would say they really did achieve that this year. I have never played the game or wanted to play the game more than I did this year. Is this the year of playability? Compared to every other year and the standard that Chris set? Probably. We have never had more performance, stability, and content ever. They literally made a patch every month. But are they meeting the expectations set by Chris at the end of last year? I would say absolutely not. He didn't even set the bar that high. Again, he specifically talked about improving on the day-to-day experience at the time, which had much less to do than we have now. Why didn't they? I think this is incredibly obvious. This weird need to always deliver something amazing. The type of things that look good on the 3 ISCs they did this year. When they don't realize that no matter what they do visually, narratively, or activity-wise, the content will always suffer majorly if they don't address the basics first. I hope this helped give you a little perspective about just how much the team actually improved on and generally did this year, but also how they still can't seem to be bothered to do the boring, on-the-surface foundational things that honestly would make this experience something people could really get excited for. And the things that, the alpha stage of development is literally for. Now, that's all I got for you. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.